Yeah, it's really incredible when you think about it. I mean, there were so many red flags here, and there were so many opportunities to intervene and to remove the kids from the home when it was obviously an unsanitary, unsafe environment, but they didn't do it.
16 kids found living in a house full of roaches and filth.
At that time, the family was living in this house on Garfield Avenue in Gallia. Children's Services considered the children neglected. A juvenile court record reads, this agency initiated an investigation on January 15th, 2020, regarding a Ciders child whose name is redacted. The child was 7 years old. It was reported the child was enrolled in Ohio Virtual Academy, OVA, in late fall of 2019, but was entered with no prior schooling, but presented significant developmental delays, an inability to speak and complete sentences or initiate conversation. It was reported that the child has not been to a pediatrician for evaluation of any medical and/or developmental delays. During the initiation of the case, Christina Ciders, the paternal grandmother, stated that the above accusations were true, but then retracted her statement on a later date. So that last part says that Grandma, Christina Ciders, confirmed the information was true, but later retracted her statement. Interesting.
And we're supposed to believe nobody saw this coming. You already know what I'm about to say. The system failed these children long before the cameras ever showed up. And now the case files are finally coming out. The records that sat buried while those kids suffered.
And there were concerns about the other Ciders children. The caseworker wrote, at the beginning of this agency's investigation, concerns about another child, age 13, not completing school through the OVA was raised due to her being enrolled on January 6, 2020. But as of February 4th, 2020, she had not logged into the account to complete schoolwork. On February 4th, 2020, she was officially withdrawn from the OVA. OVA considered the child to never have started based on no records being provided, except those collected during enrollment. After further investigation, it was determined that the child was enrolled in Gallia Digital Academy program on December 12, 2019, but no completion of schoolwork can be provided. The OVA program stated that the Ciders family is not an appropriate fit for their program and believes that a traditional brick and mortar school would be in the best interest of the children. The social worker wrote that the concerns were about all of the Ciders children. At that point, there were 9, as I mentioned, and the person who was having contact with the school about the children, it wasn't the parents. Guess who it was?
And the person who knew more than anyone else, well, she had every chance to speak up. Her name is Christina Ciders, the grandmother. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Back in January 2020, Children's Services in Gallia County opened an investigation into Gary Ciders Jr. and Elizabeth Ciders. They had 9 children at that point. 9. And the online school, Ohio Virtual Academy, they flagged the family because one of the kids, a 7-year-old, couldn't speak in complete sentences, couldn't initiate conversation, had never been to a pediatrician for any kind of developmental evaluation. Think about that. A 7-year-old child who can't hold a basic conversation. And she'd never seen a doctor about it. But the records show something else, something that didn't make the headlines. When the caseworker first sat down with Christina Ciders, the paternal grandmother, she confirmed everything. She said yes, the accusations were true. She admitted the kids were struggling. She knew. She knew about the delays. She knew about the school problems. She knew the children weren't getting what they needed. And then she retracted her statement. She took it back, just like that. Why would a grandmother do that? Why would she confirm the truth and then pretend she never said it? And look, I need you to stay with me here, because this matters, is the part nobody talks about. The caseworker wrote that all the children enrolled in online school were performing at incredibly low levels. One child had a 40% attendance rate, a 40 attendance rate. Another child, the oldest, was given an assessment in January 2020 and she was a non-reader. She knew 14 out of 26 lowercase letters, 0 out of 26 letter sounds. She could count from 1 to 12 before making mistakes. That's not a child who fell behind. That's a child who was never taught, never nurtured, never given a chance.
And the person who was having contact with the school about the children, it wasn't the parents. Guess who it was? It was Grandma, Christina Ciders. She was the one in touch with the school about the children, not Gary Jr. and Elizabeth. All of the children who were enrolled in online school were performing at incredibly low levels academically because they were barely logging on to online school, according to the caseworker. The caseworker wrote, "The school has since raised concerns regarding the children age 12, age 11, and age 9 being low academically and performing below grade level expectations. One child is at a 40% attendance level out of 100% and considered off track in the following subjects: math, literature, Mark 12, social studies, history, and science. The oldest child was given an assessment on January 19th, 2020 by her teacher, who found that she is a non-reader. The child knows 14 out of 26 lowercase letters, 21 out of 26 uppercase letters, and 0 out of 26 letter sounds, and the only pre-primer word one knew was and. In addition to struggling with the alphabet, one child can count 1 through 12 before making mistakes. On February 28th, 2020, it was reported that the child was given an assessment that found she had not made any academic progress within the last 10 weeks. Neither Gary nor Elizabeth were employed at this time. Gary Jr. listed himself as self-employed, and the records show they qualified for Medicaid and food stamps. Their hygiene was poor, and they always wore the same clothes.
And the person handling contact with the school wasn't Gary Jr. It wasn't Elizabeth. It was Grandma Christina. She was the one talking to the teachers. She was the one getting the updates. She was the one in the middle of everything.
A shelter care hearing was held later that month, and that's where a court determines whether children should remain with their parents or be placed in a shelter. That means with foster care. After the hearing, the court found, as stipulated to by the parents, there are reasonable grounds to believe that the child is in danger from her surroundings and that protective supervision of the child is necessary to prevent the child's physical and/or emotional harm. The child is in the care and custody of her parents, Gary Ciders II and Elizabeth Ciders. Children's Services began working with the family on January 15, 2020, after receiving a report that a child had been enrolled in Ohio Virtual Academy for school in late fall of 2019 with no prior schooling. She presented with significant developmental delays, inability to speak and complete sentences, or initiate conversation. She had not been seen by a pediatrician for evaluation of any medical and/or developmental delays. There were also concerns that the other school-age children in the family were performing well below grade level expectations after they had allegedly been homeschooled. Likewise, the other children have not been evaluated. The Ciders children were placed on protective supervision status, meaning a caseworker drops by unannounced for visits and ensures that the family follows a case plan.
Now, let me slow down for a second here, because I want to say something that's been sitting heavy on me. These children, they didn't have a voice. Not one of them. And the adults who were supposed to protect them, the parents, the grandmother, the caseworkers, the judges, they all had chances. Multiple chances. And every single time they looked away. Every single time they closed the case and moved on. That's not just incompetence. That's something darker. Something we need to sit with.
They leave Gallia County, so they're never to be heard from again.
Right, and there's probably no central database in the way that there is if it's a criminal conviction or an arrest warrant, where the case would follow them to a different county. So they were essentially absconding and just leaving it behind them so it wouldn't catch up with them. So yeah, it's actually very scary. I don't know what their policy is. I don't know what their sort of this is our hard line. If we see XYZ, the kids are out of the house. It's just mind-boggling.
One red flag that stood out to me was there was a 5-year-old girl, and she was not speaking well. And there was something they saw, the caseworker Cantor saw on the little girl, and it was like bruising on the back of her thigh. And there was a huge red flag, Dr. Bober, because Cantor goes to the house, this caseworker, and they won't let her up to the top floor of the house, which seems insane to me because if you're a caseworker, you're like, I'm going up to the top floor of the house.
Yeah, I'm going anywhere I need
But
to go.
right. Yeah, I'm going in and I'm going up. And
Right.
so they said when she questioned Gary and Elizabeth about the bruising on the back of the thigh of this child, they got very agitated and they wouldn't talk about
Defensive.
it. So
Right.
then they're like suspecting abuse, actual physical abuse.
Right. So it's like, how much more do you need? You know, between the unsafe, unsanitary conditions, the lead in the bloodstream, potential signs of abuse. I mean, there were red flags all over it. So it's hard to imagine that they did everything they needed to do. Their reaction was very underwhelming and I think potentially unsafe.
Okay, back to the records. By March 2020, the court placed the children on protective supervision. That meant a caseworker could drop by unannounced. Check on things. Make sure the family was following a case plan. And here's the thing, though. The children were never removed, never taken out of that environment. The court said there were reasonable grounds to believe the child was in danger from her surroundings. Read that again. In danger. And they left her there.
In December of that same year, just 2 months later, the Ciders and their 9 children had moved into the house on Honeysuckle in Cheshire. We've shown it to you before. And Children's Services opened a new case, this time over concerns that 4 of the children had high levels of lead in their systems. Caseworker Aaron Cantor wrote, "There were concerns that parents, Elizabeth and Gary, were not completing medical follow-ups. The medical staff had reported that high levels of lead can lead to developmental delays. During the initiation on December 8th, 2020, caseworker Cantor was denied access to the home and asked to come back because the children were sleeping. There were a number of red flags in caseworker Aaron Cantor's affidavit. She was denied access to the children at times, and the conditions in the home were disgusting." Cantor wrote, "At the beginning of this agency's investigation, caseworker Cantor was allowed access into the home on December 9th, 2020, but access to the children was denied. While in the home, concerns were raised due to a high population of roaches, flies, and gnats. After further investigation, the family has now become compliant with medical appointments, but medical staff are concerned that the family will stop coming to appointments once the case is closed, as this happened the last time the family had an open case. The children's medical provider and caseworker Cantor are in contact often regarding the well-being of the children. The physician has stated the children have an odor but seem to be in good health. The physician is concerned about teeth as they are not in good condition. Caseworker Cantor is also worried about another child's speech as she is almost 5 years old and cannot speak any clear language. Caseworker Cantor would like the child to have a speech evaluation to address this concern." Caseworker Cantor believed the children were at risk for harm and dependency and again requested court-ordered supervision of the children. This time, she saw potential signs of physical abuse that couldn't be explained. Cantor wrote, "Though the concerns of medical neglect have been addressed and resolved, the refusal to access the upstairs of the home and the children raises new concerns due to there being circular linear bruising on the back of one child's thigh and the lack of being able to see the children. Caseworker Cantor now has concerns of possible abuse and/or severe neglect."
By October 2020, the judge closed the case, said it was in the best interest of the child to remain in the custody of her parents. Protective supervision terminated. Case closed. 2 months later, 2 months, the Ciders family had moved to a new house, and Children's Services opened a new case. This time, 4 of the children had high levels of lead in their systems. High levels of lead can cause developmental delays, permanent brain damage, and the caseworker, Aaron Cantor, she went to the home in December 2020. She was denied access at first, told to come back because the children were sleeping. When she did get inside, she found roaches, flies, gnats, high population of all of them. The medical staff said the children had an odor. Their teeth were in bad shape. One child, almost 5 years old, couldn't speak any clear language at all. And then Cantor saw something that stopped her cold. Circular linear bruising on the back of one child's thigh. Bruises that couldn't be explained. She tried to go upstairs. The parents refused. They got agitated when she asked about the bruising. They said they didn't know anything about it. They said they weren't concerned about a cavity in the child's baby tooth. They weren't concerned. Caseworker Cantor believed the children were at risk for harm and dependency. She requested court-ordered supervision. She suspected possible abuse or severe neglect.
Caseworker Cantor also saw insect bites on another child's arms along with scratches. The child also was tugging her ear and scratching her head profusely. The parents were questioned regarding the bruising. They became agitated and stated they were unaware of any bruising. The parents also stated that the child has one cavity on her baby tooth and are not concerned about it. Caseworker Cantor has noticed the parents are always in the same clothing and do not have consistent hygiene, nor do the children. Despite all of this, Gallia County Job and Family Services did not seek custody of the children. The agency requested protective supervision, even though Gary Jr. and Elizabeth were described as uncooperative. By June 2021, the court found the caseworker had helped Gary Jr. and Elizabeth complete their case plan, and the court determined it was in the best interest of the children to remain with their parents. The case was closed. Later that year, the children were supposed to attend Ataville Elementary School, but guess what? They didn't show up. The Ciders had disappeared.
And what did Gallia County Job and Family Services do? They requested protective supervision, not removal, not custody. Supervision. Again, even though Gary Jr. and Elizabeth were described as uncooperative. Even though the signs were all there, they left those kids in that home.
So you see some balls potentially dropped here by Children's Services in Gallia County.
That's the way it looks. I didn't see what the caseworkers saw. I didn't fill out those reports. I don't have the information that they had. But when you look at this from an outsider's perspective, it seems like there were many opportunities here to intervene and prevent this tragedy from occurring. And it seems like a lot of balls were dropped from the outside.
And now those children are in protective custody. They are in therapeutic foster care. And Dr. Bober, the county is seeking permanent custody of these children, which means the Ciders, and especially with the legal jeopardy they're in, if the county gets permanent custody of these children, the Ciders will never get them back.
And, given everything that's happened, it shows you what a high bar they need to terminate those parental rights. Even after everything that's happened, finally, these kids will not go back to that home. And I guess this is what needed to happen. But it seems like something could have been done a lot sooner with earlier intervention. It seems like there would have been a better outcome.
And I hate to make this leap, but it makes you wonder, too, if there had been something more done, would the alleged sexual abuse of the other child maybe not have happened?
Yeah, we can only speculate, but it's definitely a question that would come into my mind as well.
By June 2021, the court found the caseworker had helped the parents complete their case plan. The case was closed. Again, later that year, the children were supposed to attend Ataville Elementary School. They didn't show up. The Ciders family had disappeared.
What we are now learning, I want to bring in Dr. Daniel Bober. He's a forensic psychiatrist. He has been following this case with me from the very beginning, and he can offer some insight into this case. Dr. Bober, thanks so much for coming back on.
Thanks, Anjanette.
Dr. Bober, first of all, I want to get your reaction. Let's start with the indictment. Gary Jr. and Elizabeth being indicted on sexual battery and unlawful sexual conduct with a minor charges. What are your thoughts on that?
This case has really evolved in a lot of ways, and a lot of new evidence has come to light. So it seems like every day there's a new twist and turn. So it was obviously pretty shocking.
Yeah, very shocking. And that this is somebody who was a child, some type of family member, not one of their children, but nonetheless a family member. And with the sexual battery charge, that's somebody who more than likely you were either coercing the person to engage in the sex act according to the statute, or you were in a position of authority over that person.
In these cases, you always look at the people that are closest, the so-called intimates of the person. So it's not surprising because these are the people that have the most access to the child. So in that regard, it fits a pretty standard pattern.
Now here's what you need to understand. These case files, they're not new. The information was there years ago. The school reported them. The doctors reported the lead levels. The caseworkers documented the bruises and the roach and the filth. It's all in writing, buried in the system. And the grandmother, Christina Ciders, she knew. She told the truth once. Then she retracted it. She was in contact with the school. She saw what was happening. She was the one person outside that house who could have screamed loud enough. And she went silent. Actually, wait. Let me rephrase that. She didn't go silent. She actively covered for them. She retracted her statement. She enabled the whole thing to continue. And when the family fled Gallia County, there was no central database to follow them, no arrest warrant, no criminal conviction that would track across county lines. So they just vanished. Moved to Benton County. And the nightmare continued until June 30th when authorities found those 16 children in that house on Omar Street. 16 children, living in what they called a house of horrors. And now Gary Jeter and Elizabeth are indicted on sexual battery and unlawful sexual conduct with a minor charges. Those charges are not related to their immediate family members, but they also face a mix of felony and misdemeanor counts of child endangering for those 16 children.
What is so stunning to me is the fact that the allegations made by the caseworker in these affidavits, and our first complaint was in 2020. The investigation started in January of that year, and then in March, there's an affidavit filed. And it seems like there's a lot of detail in discussing the children and how far behind they were in school.
And the condition of the home.
Yes, it was very detailed. So
Squalor,
they knew.
gnats, flies, poor hygiene. Yeah, and they left the kids there.
They left the kids there, and they initiated a plan, and they had what was called protective supervision. And I'm assuming that means, okay, the caseworker just kind of pops in and shows
Checks
up
in,
randomly.
right.
Yeah, random checks. Like, I'm just going to show up and not tell them I'm coming and see what's going on. Also, what I found interesting, Christina Ciders, grandma, she's the one, according to this caseworker, who's having contact with the school. Not the parents, not Gary Jr. and Elizabeth. It's grandma.
Right.
And then grandma says, yeah, according to the caseworker, grandma says, I know they have really bad, I know they're having a bad time in school. I know. Yeah, I get it. They can't read very well, etc. But then she retracts the statement. So it seems like we have an element of potential enabling here.
Yeah, it's really incredible when you think about it. I mean, there were so many red flags here, and there were so many opportunities to intervene and to remove the kids from the home when it was obviously an unsanitary, unsafe environment, but they didn't do it. I just can't say what these caseworkers saw when they walked in there, but if they were making surprise random visits, it seems difficult to believe that the family could have put on a show with no notice, and they wouldn't have seen something that seemed off. So that's what is baffling to me.
Here's the question that should keep every one of us up at night. If Children's Services had removed those kids in 2020, if the court hadn't closed the case, if the grandmother hadn't retracted her statement, would the alleged sexual abuse of another child even have happened? We can't answer that. But we can ask it, and we should keep asking it, over and over, until someone with power finally gives an answer. These children are now in protective custody, therapeutic foster care. The county is seeking permanent custody, which means Gary Jeter and Elizabeth will likely never get them back. But that's not justice. Not for the years those kids lost. Not for the education they never got. Not for the bruises and the lead poisoning and the roaches crawling over them while they slept. And as for Christina Ciders, the grandmother who knew and stayed quiet, she hasn't been charged with anything. Not a single thing. So tell me, what do you think should happen to someone who had the power to save those children and chose not to? I want to hear it in the comments.